Assalamu alaikum. Now, in continuation of our discussion regarding the drugs acting on cardiovascular system and the different cardiovascular diseases, now today's our topic is antihypertensive. Now, first of all, what is hypertension? So, basically, in a simple words, we can say hypertension is a sustained raised blood pressure, and the level is usually, according to international criteria, 140/90 means systolic 140 millimeter of mercury and diastolic 90 millimeter of mercury. We labelize that patient as hypertensive. We have seen if the blood pressure is less than 120/80, that is systolic blood pressure less than 120 and diastolic less than 80 millimeter mercury, cardiovascular risks are lowest. So that is the idea and the ideal situation where we want to maintain the blood pressure of a patient to minimize the cardiovascular risk. Remember, it's a lifelong problem, and usually only few symptoms appear even in the later stages of hypertension. So, patient may go on suffering from hypertension without any sign and symptoms. Some people say, okay, I am feeling headache. It may or may not be associated at all. Remember, for hypertension, the mean arterial pressure is mainly taken into consideration. We see what is the mean arterial pressure of a patient. Now, what is mean arterial pressure? Mathematically, it is roughly calculated as we usually take 60% of the diastolic and 40% of the systolic pressure of that patient. That will roughly determine the mean arterial pressure of that patient. Now, as we see previously, normal blood pressure is systolic less than 120 millimeter of mercury and diastolic less than 80 millimeter of mercury. Remember, this 120 and 80 is actually pressure present in the aorta. So, in the aorta, systolic is about 120 millimeter and diastolic is 80 millimeter mercury. While if you see pressure in the ventricles, for example, in left ventricular, almost similar to aorta, just about difference of 1 millimeter mercury. While in case of diastolic, the pressure will be absolutely zero. No. Similarly, right ventricle, obviously here pressure is quite less because it is receiving the blood from the veins with a very low pressure. So, maximum up to 25 millimeter mercury in the right ventricle we observed during systole, and similarly 0 millimeter mercury during diastole. Now, let us have some mathematical calculation and understanding of how blood pressure physiologically is calculated and determined and how we can manage that. Now, mathematically, we know blood pressure is a product of cardiac output into peripheral resistance. Either of these or both of these, if increase, there will be hypertension. And if we want to treat them, we have to decrease either cardiac output or peripheral resistance or both. Cardiac output itself depends upon the stroke volume and into heart rate. If the stroke volume is more, cardiac output is more. Heart rate is increased, cardiac output is more. As obviously, behind that, force of contraction is also playing a very important part. While the peripheral resistance is determined by mainly the tone of the arterioles. So, this peripheral resistance increases with vasoconstriction and decreases with vasodilation. So, By keeping in mind this slide, we must remember that if we want to control the blood pressure, we must address cardiac output and peripheral resistance, and out of cardiac output, either we have to decrease the stroke volume or we have to decrease the heart rate, obviously along with decrease in the force of contraction. Let us have another understanding about the hypertension. For example, at number 1, this is a diagrammatic representation of heart. We know heart pumps out the blood. Here usually the important receptors are primarily beta 1, alpha 1, along with very important role of the calcium influx. All are increasing the cardiac activity. Beta 1 stimulation, alpha 1 stimulation, there will be increased cardiac activity. Similarly, increased calcium influx, increased cardiac activity. From the previous discussion, if we want to decrease the cardiac activity, we have to block these receptors or block the channels. So we have to use either beta 1 blocker, alpha 1 blocker or calcium channel blocker. The cardiac activity will decrease and similarly blood pressure will decrease. Second important site is the peripheral arterioles, where the dominant alpha 1 receptors are present, which are producing vasoconstriction, or calcium influx is producing smooth muscle contraction of the peripheral arterioles and producing vasoconstriction, while beta 2 inhibitory nature, so they will produce vasodilation of the arterioles. So alpha 1 and calcium channel stimulation will increase peripheral resistance, and beta 2 by producing vasodilation will decrease the peripheral resistance. So basically peripheral arterioles determine the peripheral resistance. Third point, obviously first blood was coming from heart to the arterioles and capillaries to the venules. When the blood moves to peripheral venules, here dominant are the alpha 1 receptor present, stimulatory nature, they will produce venoconstriction, and this venoconstriction blood will be pushed towards heart more efficiently, and more venous return will be there. Usually these peripheral veins, also known as capacitant vessels, because they have so much elasticity, they can accommodate large amounts of blood. So other name of these peripheral venules is the capacitant vessel. These peripheral vessels or veins determines the venous return. If alpha 1 vasoconstriction is there, there will be increased venous return, and if those are blocked, alpha 1 blocking, there will be venodilation, venous return will decrease. And remember, as we discussed previously while we were discussing the sympathomimetic and sympathoplegic drugs, alpha beta blocker, etc., we know that veins are the sites which are determining the actually, if they are dilated, postural hypotension will occur. Now venous return means how much blood is returning towards heart from the venous side. If that is increased, obviously stroke volume will increase. More blood is reaching there, stroke volume of blood is pushed in a single stroke. Remember, all these are being controlled in the center in the brain by the vasomotor center, where dominant alpha 2 receptors are present, which are presynaptic in nature. They are controlling all these through sympathetic activity, heart, arterioles and the veins. But also a third or rather fourth part, kidney, renal side, where we know beta 1 receptors present, beta 1 stimulating in nature. So on the kidney, renin release is there, so there will be increased renin, and through angiotensin aldosterone mechanism, blood volume will increase, NLT, MLT blood pressure may be increased. So if we want to decrease the blood pressure here at the renal side, and we block beta 1 receptor present here, renin release will be reduced, angiotensin aldosterone mechanism will be affected, and ultimately blood volume will decrease and blood pressure will decrease. Another important thing is regulation of blood pressure in hypertensive patient, that is through baroreceptors and the renin-angiotensin controlling system. Usually in hypertension, they are set at a higher level of blood pressure. Body is set at the higher level. Considering these conditions, now let's see the therapeutic regimen and select the proper drug. Regarding the classification or the groups of the antihypertensive drugs, we include number 1, we want to decrease the cardiac activity, as we have seen previously. We will use beta blockers or calcium channel blockers. Both will decrease the cardiac activity and ultimately decrease the cardiac output and decrease the systolic blood pressure. Decrease venous return. Obviously, venous return is depending upon the tone of the veins. So, dilation of the veins or the capacitor venules, either mainly through alpha-1 blocker, but also angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors are also putting their effect on the veins, or some sympathoplegic we will see later on. Rather, we have discussed already sympathoplegic, centrally acting, methyl dopamine, clonidine, etc. They also affect, and similarly, adrenergic neuron blockers, etc. They also control the tone of the veins. So, they will produce venodilation, and I have already told you, due to venodilation, venous return is decreased, ultimately stroke volume is decreased, and ultimately cardiac output decrease and systolic blood pressure falls. This venous return also falls if we decrease the blood volume, and obviously we know blood volume is decreased by the excessive or extensive use of diuretics. Decrease peripheral resistance. We know peripheral resistance is determined by the arterial tone. So, we want to produce arterial dilation. So, we want to decrease the arterial tone, that will be decreased by decreasing the sympathetic tone. So, we can use ACE inhibitors, alpha blocker or some beta blocker, which later on by unknown mechanism will reduce the blood pressure. Or there is another mechanism. What? They decrease arterial volume. So, obviously blood volume is decreased by the excessive and intensive use of diuretics. Now, groups used as antihypertensive, the first most important group is the diuretics used in hypertension. Out of diuretics, 3 main groups are thiazides, loop diuretics and potassium sparing diuretics. These 3 groups are mainly used as antihypertensive. Out of that, thiazides are the most important one, which includes hydrochlorothiazide and indapamide. We can use in acute hypertension, we want to decrease the blood volume, etc. furosemide and metonide. Or in chronic use, we can use spironolactone, amiloride as potassium sparing diuretics. First 2 thiazide loop diuretics are wasting potassium, they are producing hypokalemia, while potassium sparing diuretics, they are retaining potassium. Second group, sympathoplegic, centrally acting. As I told you, through alpha-2 agonist activity, pericentric receptors, methyl dopamine, clonidine, they will decrease the central sympathetic activity and ultimately decrease the blood pressure. So, they stimulate presymptomatic alpha-2 receptor, they decrease sympathetic outflow, they decrease norepinephrine from the central parts and ultimately resulting in decreased blood pressure. Sympathetic activity can also be reduced by adrenergic receptor blocking. For example, alpha blocking, prazosin, trazodone, deoxycytosine. So, obviously, few alpha-1 activity is present on heart, otherwise alpha-1 receptors mainly in arterioles and venules. Beta blockers, they may be non-selective or selective. Non-selective, for example, propranolol. Beta selective means basically on the heart and renin system, nadolol, carvedilol, atenolol, methoxyolol and bisoprolol. While few partial agonists, pindolol, escitalol, pentobarbital, they can also be used, partial agonists, will behave as an antagonist for the circulating catecholamines. So, circulating catecholamines which were responsible for the increased cardiac activity, increased receptor activity. So, partial agonists will block those receptors and produce their own submaximal response. Similarly, alpha blocker and beta blocker combine labetalol, carvedilol. They will block both alpha and beta at a time. Similarly, adrenal neuron blocker, gonadotropin, gonadril, bethanidine, razapine, etc. So basically, they are decreasing the sympathetic activity at the level of neurons, adrenogen neuron. So obviously, neurons supplying all the areas, whether central or peripheral, they will decrease sympathetic activity of both heart, of arterioles and venules. And remember, don't forget the effects on venules. They can produce potentially postural hypotension. Ganglion blockers, trimethoprim, mecamolin mainly. So because ganglions are supplying both parasympathetic and sympathetic, but here we mainly concerned for the adrenergic subdivision. So on the adrenergic side, they will decrease blood pressure, but on the cholinergic side, they will produce along with the side effects. So we don't want ganglion blocking from the parasympathetic, but they are producing effects. So they will appear as side effects on the GIT, on the eye, respiratory tract, etc. Vasodilators. Now vasodilators means mainly arterioles and venules also. Remember, whenever we are calling a vessel, vessel means arterioles, venules. So similarly, vasodilator means dilating the arterioles and the venules. First group is directly acting. We have already discussed the vasodilator. We know hydralazine, minoxidil, netoperoxide. So all these are directly dilating the vessels, but we know they are so strong vasodilator, they are usually used in acute emergency, hypertensive crisis. Dopamine agonist, phenol-dopam, by acting on the dopamine 1 receptor, which is producing vasodilation of the splanchnic areas of the renal vessel, etc. So they are also producing vasodilation. Phenol-dopam is also used in acute emergency. Calcium channel blocker. Now again we know they are mainly present on arterioles. So they will produce arterial dilation by blocking the calcium channel blocker or those sites, verapamil, diltiazem, amlodipine, nicardipine, nifedipine, etc. Remember, in vascular smooth muscles, arterioles are more sensitive to calcium. Very, very little effect on venules. So that is why calcium channel blocker rarely produce venodilation and rarely produce postural hypotension. So obviously, by acting on the arterioles, they will relax the vessels and decrease the peripheral resistance. Antihypertensive mechanism of thiazide is very important to know. This question may be asked in the theory, in the viva, or even regarding this subject. Some MCQ may also be developed. Remember, thiazides, because they are diuretics, so initial fall with thiazide is due to salt and water depletion, with reduction in the blood volume and reduction in cardiac output. But we know such changes are usually compensated within few days. Again, blood volume is restored and such fall is not long lasting. So what thiazides are doing? After about 3 to 4 weeks, peripheral resistance falls. Remember, peripheral resistance falls. How? By depleting the local salt of the vessels, their stiffness is reduced. So due to decreased vascular stiffness, there is a vasodilation, increased compliance of the vessels, which is a sort of vasodilation. So this second mechanism is actually responsible for the fall in blood pressure. So if you are asked in the question about the exam, in the exam, remember you should tell both initially due to salt depletion, water depletion, but later on it may take 3 to 4 weeks to show their onset of action. Okay. Usually up to 2/3 of the essential hypertensive patient may be showing response to thiazides. So, thiazides are very, very important groups in controlling the essential hypertensive patient. If they are used along with ACE inhibitors and calcium blocker, they can enhance their activity of the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors and the calcium channel blocker. If they are used with vasodilator, we know while we were discussing vasodilator, we know compensating mechanism starts and after a few days salt and water retention occurs. So, to address that, we can use thiazide along with vasodilator, because otherwise they may cause salt and water retention. Outcome of these thiazide is almost similar to ACE inhibitor, calcium channel blocker. So, that is why I am telling you that thiazides are very important antihypertensive agent, because ultimately effect is almost equal to ACE inhibitors or calcium channel blocker. However, if we combine with these thiazide, ACE inhibitor, etc., the total effects will be much more, better controlled blood pressure. Now, usual treatment start is only if, number one, the raised blood pressure is persistently present at least on 3 consecutive visits in the outpatient department or in your clinic. In all situations, raised blood pressure in lying, in sitting, in standing, in all positions, if the blood pressure is seen raised, then we will start treatment, and if that raise in consecutively observed on the 3 different visits, 3 consecutive different visits, not only 3 days, no, 3 different, it may be after every 1 week. So, at least 3 visits must prove that there is a persistent blood pressure raised. Second, if the patient is suffering from blood pressure and no secondary cause is detected related to endocrinology or related to any renal artery stenosis, Cushing syndrome, etc., which only up to 5% of the patient may suffer from secondary cause, non-essential. Otherwise, 95% of the patients are without any known cause, but we labelize them as essential hypertension. So, remember, essential hypertensive patients are those patients who are suffering from hypertension without any known cause. Because in the known cause, we don't use antihypertensive, we will go for the treatment of the cause, removal of the cause, and patient will be all right, inshallah. But in essential hypertensive, we have to use antihypertensive drugs. Remember, usually we start non-pharmacological measures first of all. For example, we advise the patient for sodium restriction less than 100 microgram per day, or we advise to reduce the weight or to do regular exercise for few weeks. If the blood pressure controlled with non-pharmacological measures, we will not go for pharmacological, that is for the drugs. But if non-pharmacological measures are unable to control the blood pressure, we have to now continue these non-pharmacological, but we have to add or we have to start the pharmacological antihypertensive management. Fourth one, if there is a presence of ambulatory blood pressure only when the patient is in activity, patient is suffering from blood pressure, or isolated only systolic blood pressure there, or in old age elderly hypertension, then we will start antihypertensive therapy. Remember, before starting the antihypertensive therapy, we must have a consideration of how much blood pressure is there, level of blood pressure, what is the age, young age, middle age, old age, what is the sex, or is there any damage to the end organ of the retina, of the kidney, of the cardiac, of the brain, etc., presence or severity of the end organ damage, or some presence of other diseases, comorbidity. For example, any cardiovascular risk, a known hypertensive patient or a diabetic patient, etc. So, we must consider all these conditions before starting the blood pressure treatment. Another important thing, don't reduce your blood pressure up to normal levels. कि आपने खींच तान के लाजमी नॉर्मल लेकर नो, just reduce up to comfortable level which may be slightly above the normal level. No problem, leave it there. Because if we will try to reduce it below the normal level, up to normal level, we have seen there will be cerebral hypoperfusion, less blood supply will be going towards brain, and some brain injury may occur, because chronic hypertension is associated with auto-regulatory changes in the cerebral blood flow. Patient brain is set at that level, and if we will reduce below normal up to normal, this setting is disturbed, auto-regulatory changes are disturbed, and cerebral hypoperfusion is observed and brain injury may be seen. So, don't reduce the blood pressure up to normal. Now, let us go for some management of specific mild hypertension. Obviously, initially non-pharmacological steps. If controlled, okay. If don't, then add pharmacological. We can start with the monotherapy, either with the thiazide diuretics or with the beta blocker or with the ACE inhibitors. If not controlled, then we can combine either of these, two or all three. If the blood pressure is not controlled with these three groups, alternatively, angiotensin receptors blocker. We know ACE inhibitors can produce severe dry cough. So, we can go for the receptor blocker, because receptor blockers are not having this side effects of dry cough. Or then we can start calcium channel blockers or combination of alpha beta labetalol, we have seen previously, or centrally acting sympathoplegic, clonidine, methyl dopa, etc., etc. But these are not the first choice, these are the alternative groups. If the patient is having concomitant problem, comorbidities, for example, patient is hypertensive but with diabetic and with renal disease, then go for ACE inhibitors, because we know ACE inhibitors are renoprotective also. They can save the renal vessel damage, which is very common in the renal disease and the diabetic patient. Or if the patient is suffering from ischemic heart disease angina, then go for beta blocker, calcium channel blocker. Remember, these answers may be asked even in the MCQs. Third, if the patient is suffering from heart failure, we can use ACE inhibitors or we can add diuretics, because ACE inhibitors are addressing the remodeling of the hypertension of the cardiac failure, will re-establish the normal elliptical shape of the heart after continuous use. So, they are important in heart failure. Similarly, diuretics are reducing the blood volume and reducing the stress on the heart wall. During pregnancy, we must remember there are few groups which are contraindicated during pregnancy. For example, we know ACE inhibitors, the receptor blocker, etc. So, we will use for difadapine, calcium channel blockers, or methyl dopa, or oral hydralazine. Remember all these drugs, because they may be asked in the Viva, but especially in the MCQs. If hypertension is very severe, we can use intravenous vasodilator, for example, hydralazine, diazoxide, nitazoxide, etc., and phenoldiazepam, etc. But also we can use intravenous nifedipine and labetalol. If the patient is suffering from benign prostatic hyperplasia also along with hypertension, so obviously we will go for alpha blocker, because it will address both. It will reduce the blood pressure, at the same time it will not allow the retention of urine. The alpha block, one blocker will relieve the urine retention due to benign prostate hyperplasia. If hypertension occur during operation or after operation, we will go for esmolol. There are some steps in the hypertensive care for the patient. If single drug is not effective, obviously I have already told you, combine the drugs with different site of action. Don't use drugs of the same group. कई डायरेटिक्स ही ऐड करते जाएं, बीटा ब्लॉकर ही एक ही किस्म के इस्तेमाल कर लिए, कैल्शियम नो, we must combine the drugs from different groups to lower the pressure effectively and minimize the toxicity. For example, combining a beta blocker or ACE inhibitors or thiazide or the calcium blocker to an ACE inhibitor, etc. etc. Sympathoplegic or directly active vasodilator can also be added with these groups. Another important thing is market. Pharmaceutical companies have developed a fixed dose combination. They claim that this is very good for the patient compliance. Yes, fewer pills are better tolerated by the patient, but there is limitation because titration of the individual drug cannot be done. If we are using a combination of thiazide diuretics with ACE inhibitors, with beta blocker, with calcium blocker, etc., etc. But if we want to reduce the dose of any of these, we cannot do because here the dose is fixed. We also know that with the chronic treatment of hypertension, gradual blood volume expands. So, to prevent that volume expansion during the use of powerful vasodilators, especially, always use diuretics with these vasodilators, and we use strong diuretics, furosemide. Remember, strong diuretics are loose diuretics, furosemide, etc. We may face some failure in the response of the antihypertensive therapy. So, what are the causes? The most important non-compliance, and this is not only for hypertension, remember this may be for all type of disease, non-compliance of the patient. In our society, rarely patient wants to take the drug regularly, number one, and all the drugs, whatever the have been prescribed, वो अपने तौर पे कम कर लेते हैं, or they even reduce the dose. They don't take full dose as prescribed. So, non-compliance. Second, excessive sodium intake. शादी ब्याह इधर उधर no sodium intake prevention. Inadequate diuretic therapy with excessive blood volume. That may also produce failure, which may occur during therapy of the diuretics. Or there may be some drug interaction. We are using some other drugs also. Patient may be psychotic or depressive patient using tricyclic. It will reduce the effectiveness of the hypertension. NSAIDs similarly, but NSAIDs are very common in arthritis, etc. They will also, by reducing effect on prostaglandin at the level of kidney, they can decrease the effectiveness of hypertension. Or abuse of amphetamines or cocaine, or excessive use of caffeine or oral contraceptive, because oral contraceptive can reduce sodium water retention and they will reduce the effectiveness of the hypertension. So, drug interactions are also very important. Don't forget it. Remember, optimal blood pressure endpoint is just below 140, 138 or just above 80, 83 millimeter mercury. Lowering blood pressure below this level produce no further benefit except in diabetics. So, don't try to lower the blood pressure below this level. Although rare hypertensive emergencies may be seen, I have already told you that this usually happens when hypertension is not properly controlled. Suddenly, patient may suffer from hypertensive emergency, hypertensive crisis. Here, hypertension is usually associated with vascular damage, hemodynamic complication and encephalopathy. So, don't try to ignore these hypertensive emergencies. Otherwise, any of these or all of these complications may be seen. Vascular damage of brain, of eye, of heart or kidney may occur. Hemodynamic complications similarly can occur. And encephalopathy is also very common. Brain hemorrhage, etc. is also very common. So, don't ignore hypertensive emergency. These are the possible causes of vascular damage or hemodynamic complication or encephalopathy. Usually, ICU monitoring and continuous blood pressure recording may be required in acute hypertensive crisis. And also carefully monitor the fluid intake and fluid output of the patient. Measure the body weight daily if you are using diuretic, etc., because that are the indicator of the total body fluid volume. If body weight is reducing, that means blood volume is reducing. If you have achieved the goal of reduction of blood volume, that is important, because otherwise compensatory rise in blood volume may occur, and that will be indicated by the increased body weight. Acute hypertensive crisis, we have already seen parenteral antihypertensive use. Okay, we will lower the blood pressure within few hours with dilated hydralazine, diazoxide, nitroprusside, etc., or phenoldopam, labetalol, nifedipine, nitroglycerin, etc. After reasonable control of blood pressure, up to 25% reduction in diastolic blood pressure, it should not be less than 100 and 110 millimeter mercury. After controlling the parenteral control the blood pressure with the parenteral routes, we can switch over towards the oral therapy. So, oral therapy should be substituted for smoother long-term management of the hypertension. Remember, there may be some racial differences. Blacks usually show less response to beta blocker as inhibitors. Chinese require low doses of beta blocker.